Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Amanda and today we are here with another video about the Daniel Smith Gouache Paints. I've decided to give the Daniel Smith Gouache Paints a second chance because I don't believe that the sketchbook that I was working in was very good for them. So I decided to use some watercolour paper to see how they acted on them. I'm afraid I don't know what kind of watercolour paper this is because I cut it up quite a while ago. So it could be any brand, but I think it might be Artful. Not sure, not 100%. So I think that the issue with these paints to begin with when I was using them in my sketchbook is that one, was using them wrong, and two, they don't like the sketchbook paper, which is understandable. The sketchbook paper is not that thick. It's mixed media paper. It's quite smooth and it does pill a little bit if you use too much water, so that is understandable. And I think that these gouache paints are leaning more towards watercolour than acrylic in consistency, and they are traditional gouaches, not acrylic gouache. There was a little bit of confusion, I think, from a viewer who has thought that these paints are acrylic gouache. They're the same as the Turner brand and a lot of other gouaches that come in the acrylic gouache style, but these are traditional gouache, which means that they can be reactivated after they have been laid down and dried, whereas the acrylic gouache can't. So once you put them down and they dry, you cannot reactivate them and move them around and mix them. So you have to be careful about layering, and also the brushes that you can use with these are quite varied. You can use the ones that are supposed to be used for watercolour, and you can use the ones for acrylic as well, and they'll work. I'm using one that's mainly for acrylic right now, and I think that's why I'm having a lot of bother with these, because acrylic brushes don't tend to hold as much water and paint, and I think that these do lend better to watercolour type brushes. Daniel Smith are actually known for watercolours, and they are really amazing paints. I love their watercolours. I don't use watercolour anymore just because I don't really like the brand, the medium as much as I used to. I find gouache much easier and more joyous to work with, and I like the finish more than watercolour, so I don't use them that much anymore. But I did, when I tried the watercolour, Daniel Smith watercolours, I did really enjoy them, and I don't think that these gouache paints are bad. I just think that I'm not used to them and I have to adjust my workflow. They are better when used in a very watery consistency and built up to the gouache consistency. And even on this painting, I was still trying to use them like my other gouache paints, even here in this test, when I knew that. I was just so used to working the way that I usually work that I was just trying to use them in the same way, and it was quite annoying. However, I will say that the vibrancy of these paints are beautiful. They do work really well, and they are gorgeous when you water them down. A lot of the times when you water gouache down, they don't work very well and they're quite streaky and they're hard to use in that consistency, but these actually blend really seamlessly and nicely like watercolours. So as I said, I think that these brands have, like Daniel Smith, have made it so that they are more akin to watercolours rather than acrylic paints, because acrylic paints are thicker in consistency and they're easier to build up and layer on top of each other, whereas watercolours are easier to blend and they are nicer in a watery consistency. And I think that they have just decided that they want their gouache paints to act a little bit more like watercolour rather than acrylic, which is fine. Brands can, different brands will make paints in a different way depending on how much binder they use versus paint, depending on the pigments and all that as well. I have actually used them in my sketchbook a little bit since, but I don't think I should because I just think that my sketchbook just does not like them. I will still fill up my sketchbook and use my sketchbook, but just with the cheaper brands of gouache paint. It's just a bit weird to me how they don't work very well with that particular sketchbook, but the sketchbook is fine with other gouache brands. But I think it's, like I said, because these are made a little bit differently than the Himi gouache and the Holbein. The Himi gouache are really marketed in a different way anyway. They call them jelly consistency gouaches or gouache, and they are also stored differently, so they do dry out a little bit more than what the ones in the tubes do. So I think even if I did put these in a tube or in a case, then they would act a little bit differently. I still have the Daniel Smith gouache paints in this little tin that I put them in, and they have finally started to dry out a little bit more. That's been 2 weeks, I think, but they're still wet to the touch. Like if you touch the top of it, paint will come off on your finger. So that's interesting to know, but it's nice to know that they will dry in the pans eventually, because I do want to take them out on plein air and try them outside, because I do miss painting outside, even though it's coming into the autumn now, so it'll probably be too cold to do that. But yeah, anyway, recently, as of yesterday or the day before, I tried new paints. I know I said I wasn't going to do it, but I am really determined to find tube paints that I don't mind using with my real paintings outside of my sketchbook. So I've decided to buy another 4 colours. I bought I'm not going to tell you the brand because that's a surprise for next week's video, because we're going to try these out as well. But I do want to talk a little bit about them in this video just because I want to compare just a little bit. But I bought a cadmium yellow hue, a cadmium red medium and an ultramarine deep. If you mix the ultramarine deep and the cadmium red together, you do get a very weird maroony purple. And I also bought a burnt umber, so those will be exciting to try because I wanted to compare to see if these more expensive paints would act like Daniel Smith ones more, Winsor & Newton more, or Holbein and Himi more. Winsor & Newton are really good, I do enjoy them, but they are oily, so when you put them out of the tube, if you leave them in the tube for a while and you squeeze them out, a bunch of oil will come out first. They're like separated. I don't know if it's not oil, it's the pigment, it's whatever it's not the pigment either, sorry, it's the binder, and whatever the binder is that they use, I don't know if it's gum arabic or whatever, but that comes out first and they separate. Otherwise I would use Winsor & Newton because they are so easy to get where I am. I just need to go to Hobbycraft and get them and they would be there. The point in me saying that I had bought new ones was that I tried them in my sketchbook. I just swatched them out. I didn't actually like try and paint with them or anything like that, but they acted the exact same as the Daniel Smith ones did in that particular sketchbook. The sketchbook I'm going on about, by the way, is the Stillman & Burn Beta series sketchbook, and it is meant for mixed media work, and it is a little bit less thick than watercolour paper usually is. It would be interesting to see how these work on watercolour papers that are premium, like Arches and other brands. I would be really interested to see how they would work. I don't know if this was a bad idea or not, but I did decide to ultimately squeeze the Daniel Smith gouache paints into my Himi gouache palette, just because I knew that I wasn't going to use them anymore, and I knew that I was going to buy these new brand, and I was kind of hoping that this new brand was going to be good because I have used a tube of theirs in the past. There's a little hint for you. I have a tube of these in a different colour, so I have used them and I like the consistency, but the consistency, especially of the red, is completely different than the consistency of the other colour that I already own. So it's a bit weird. It's a bit interesting to see, and I will continue to try different ones just to see if I can get ones that I liked. I really want to try the Shinhan ones, but I have spent so much money on art supplies in the past month that I think I should probably have a break from trying new ones, and I should maybe give the ones that I have bought from the tubes a good fighting chance, and maybe even use up the whole tube just to compare and see if I actually like them or not. Unfortunately though, I didn't buy another red or blue so that I could mix them and make purples and pinks. I really struggle with purples and pinks, to be honest, but I think that mainly the things that I am planning to paint are mainly greens and blues, and on the cooler side anyway, browns, so I think we won't have a problem with that in that regard. But I am excited to continue to explore this gouache journey, and if you are too, then you can hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. If you have, thank you so much for your support, and here is the finished result of this little painting I did, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.